Thomas says, "Dear, I'm worried. I don't want to talk." Good morning. Good morning. I'm trying to say good morning. Thank you so much for having me here. I have a very different task. Harry never lets that per diem go to something else. I think I have a very simple task. My task really is to figure out how to navigate us through this opening stage. How do you reimagine governance in a way that is agile, I think open and inclusive? My name is there. I try to do a couple of things. I think a couple of things. One is that the thing about agile, open, and inclusive also must also be sustainable and ensuring that governance does not necessarily create more challenges. I like to start with this slide because the challenge of governance is also how do we govern not just people, but also the planet and prosperity. So we have three challenges, as I said, even as you talk about governance, there's always a context. Climate, I think it flooded 2 days ago. Nani alinyeshewa? Who was rained on? And we saw what happened in April. So always when it rains, there's a disruption. Demography, watu wa kuanguka nayo. Gen Z is right. And then tech. Which is how we operate. So I think it becomes very important. And what this does basically is we've seen that technologies are changing how we live, learn, work, and everything that we do. It's reshaping everything, including government. And you've had the kind of trends that Gabriel has mentioned, but also Gilbert. The other part, of course, is the context is also that more than half of the population lives in cities. So cities are an interesting challenge. If you talk to the judiciary, they'll tell you 60% of all their cases are in cities. So cities are dynamic and unique. But then also this rapid urbanization is creating stresses on our resources, but also increasing challenges around climate. What are the trends? So I always like to pick these four. One, of course, is globalization. When we say governance, we are borderless. Now, we're operating in a world without borders. If you go online, I'm sure Smart Gov starts trending, not only in Kenya. New behaviors, because people like to take photos of their croissant. Gabriel, I saw you before you ate. You like to live public lives. And then, of course, Gen Zs, we have a new demography. Kenya, median age 19.7. Niger, 14. Mali, 16. And you know what I'm talking about. If we do not get our act together, we have a challenge of democracy. And of course, tech in itself. How many people know how old GPT is, the current version? Current version of GPT? 22 months. You know, that's a toddler. I had children a very long time ago, so I don't remember what they used to call that. But GPT is 22 months old. It's changing very quickly. The latest version, Strawberry, is 15 days old. Changes very quickly. So they went to 1, 2, 2.5, 3.5, 4, ran out of names in 22 months. It's moving very quickly. But what are the digital trends? We have 8 billion people in the world. 66% have internet, but I'll show you something else. You are more on social media. Kenya nyinyi tunawajua. And then there's a lot of cell phones. I hope Safaricom is here. But let me draw you to something there. Eastern Africa, pale. It's good when you're in the world, but it's good when you narrow down. 26.7% in this region. So as much as the numbers look good, the reality is that less than 30% of citizens in this region have access to the internet. Put a pin on that. So smart government is for how many people? Mbona mnanyamaza? Usapadie mulikuwa mnacheka. The other part is that out of the 30%, what are you doing with the internet? Chatting. Alafu next, social network. Next, search. Sijui mnatafuta nini? People always searching something. So those are your top 3 use cases. 30% connected. Out of the 30% connected, 94.7% mnafanya chat tu na message. Niendelee. So basically it tells you something. even if we are to increase connectivity to 100%, does it mean that we'll be using it for effectiveness or for things that matter? So efficiency and productivity is something that we need to think about. So if you are here building capacity, nimekupatia siri. Kuna market kubwa sana. And that's what is happening now. Things are becoming smarter than ever. So we are hearing digitization. Things are becoming smarter. Many things are becoming virtual. So I'm sure that some people will be telling us cloud. Musiangalie juu. Every time I hear cloud, people start looking up. So stop looking at cloud. But I think basically the idea is that things are accelerating. And if they're accelerating, it's creating uncertainty. And Gilbert and I are having this discussion around, do you do policies or do you just move? So I think the trade-offs have to be interesting, where policy making cannot catch up or is not going as fast as we can around technology. GPT, again, 22 months. How many bills have gone through Parliament in 22 months? Just to understand the frame. The other piece, of course, is the risks. Risks to privacy, data security, and democracy. We saw what was happening with Mandamano, issues around misinformation, disinformation, deepfakes. We're seeing the US. We're seeing the Pope was in a Balenciaga swag. But we're seeing what is happening. So I think basically a lot of things are happening. But again, it means companies are becoming exponential. WhatsApp, I think, has about 55 workers. Instagram has 15. It's always less people, more work. We're calling it exponential companies. It's creating stresses on revenue, so smartness and smart gov. You need to rethink how we understand revenue collection. But also the issue, and it's good you had somebody who talks about inclusivity. If 27 to 30% of people have access to the internet, it tells you a majority of people are marginalized and not included. So how do you ensure that we have a responsibility to include those who are not necessarily connected? And this is the issue, right? We are creating inequalities. Because interesting enough is that with acceleration, the early adopters and the few who have technology and access are getting better experience, better services. Those who do not are getting marginalized and lower. If you don't have a LinkedIn account, I don't think you can get a job today. It's a reality. Nobody does advertising anymore in newspapers. Wakifanya, wamefanya kwa sababu ya waliambiwa wafanye. But believe me, they're looking at LinkedIn, right? So there has to be a way that we're equalizing that. But I think for me, the big issue, and I always say this, is that there's a disconnect with public sector, right? That's why smart government is important. Because people are talking to us, what? 21st century technology. We are listening to them with what? 20th century. Tunawasikiza na fax. Gen Z, mnajua fax ni nini? And then providing 19th century responses, smoke signals, na madrums. So there has to be a way that you're listening to citizens with 22nd century technologies, because citizens are always way ahead of you. Quickly, this one I narrowed down to public sector. And this is the issue. The issue is always skills. Normally, I do a broader snapshot of skills. Now I've narrowed down to public sector. Fastest declining skills. Do we still have administrative and clerks in government? Situonge ukweli. Ubalozi nimeweka kando kwanza. Tunaambiana ukweli. Do we have analog data processors? Watu wa comms. Gabriel, watu yako, sema ukweli. Watu wale wa comms. Those skills are declining. And maybe that's why you have a disconnect, because you're talking to people who are on that other side. Data analysts and data science. If there's a message that I have to send today, HR in public sector needs to change. These are the skills you need to hire. Agile project management. I think we had that chat today morning. Design thinking, digital leadership and strategic thinking. So there's a cheat sheet there. We need to upskill very quickly in terms of how we do that. If we don't do that, 40% of the jobs around the world are going to disappear. Change or be changed, or be dislocated or disconnected. So the idea is that unless we start to move very quickly, because AI is simply automating many things, you don't have to see it. Msianza kutafuta AI, it's embedded. I know people look for AI apps. I don't know what those things are. But the idea is that you'll be disrupted and dislocated. 40%. And I'm saying in the next 2 years. And simply because I think, because we do not adapt very quickly, then we are very slow at responding. It's an issue of imagination. These tools are there. We have all the big techs in Kenya. The other part, of course, is is how we set norms, I've mentioned, are just too slow. We really need to think how we set norms in a way that are agile and responsive as a title for this. The problem, of course, is that with the acceleration, there are too many problems. So public sector folks are always dealing with pain points. Kuna pain mahali. There's always a pain point. When you have a headache, it doesn't mean it's your head paining. There's a pain somewhere. And we keep on responding to pain points. We do not think the long term. So we need to refigure how we deal with the pain points, but also do long-term strategic thinking. It means we need to change our mindset. It needs to stop to be linear. The world is not moving in a straight line anymore. It's more dynamic. How do we ensure that we have a dynamic change? The rules have changed. Technology now takes 22 months to scale. 22 months. Before it took, 10, 15 years or more? I'm sure the fax machine took forever. The phone took forever, but these ones are moving very quickly. So we need to have a very non-linear, I think, inclusivity, and then agile. We need to collaborate more because not one mind can fix a lot of the problems that we have. So what is smart government? When I was being told to frame this, I think it's about responsiveness. It's not about technology. Mtu amekanyaga waya. Waya imekanyagwa. Somebody has stepped on the wire there. Smart Gov, as I said, it's not about responsiveness. No, it's about responsiveness. It's not about technology. And it has to be about people. Because smartness really, really, really must be grounded on how services are responsive and are adaptive to what people do. I have my cheat sheet somewhere. Can you bring my phone? I will continue to use my phone if that watu wakanyaga waya wamenikanyagia waya. Thank you. Oh, okay. So I think, and part of the smartness is also how do you adapt and respond to citizens' need in a very responsive manner. So technologies that are beginning to shape everything that we do, and we need to adopt technologies as much as possible. And so basically, I wanted to land on one technology that I would be remiss if I leave this stage and not talk about it, which is artificial intelligence. Nimeambiwa ningoje. Mbona sijapoziwa time? Sijapoziwa time hapa. Sijapoziwa time. Hasa unga. Unga si, but then that unga is called anga. Si unga. Yeah,
we kept seeing it.
It's put a Kenyan accent to it. The UN General Assembly is your unga. Because when
we kept seeing it on the timelines and wondering, what is this unga? Now it's even, are we back?
Unga is UN General Assembly. This one very quickly was on it's called the Summit of the Future. It was the Future Pact. One of the biggest things that was being adopted was the Global Digital Compact that was looking at how to govern artificial intelligence in a more efficient way. 3 outcomes. One is a scientific panel, hopefully that Kenyans will apply to be in the scientific panel, who are part of negotiating that. Second thing was in an AI fund. We need money to do these things, to build compute data and talent and governance. The third one, of course, was a capacity building network, na nimerudi. So AI, basically, AI. And the AI we're talking about, I think, is generative artificial intelligence, being able to generate content from existing content, which is a tricky part. But the reality, as I tell people, AI is neither artificial nor intelligent, so msiogope. We still have human agency that is building these technologies. So there's no black box somewhere. AI is still being by people and people must build it. AI is not new very quickly because public sector wants to build it. 1950. Let me demystify that. Didn't start 22 months. The current version was 22 months. But 1950 was the first AI. I know 1990 something was when we started hearing a computer beating the greatest chess player. That was artificial intelligence. Then we started hearing Siri in 2011 with the iPhone, Alexa 2014 with Amazon. Then now is where we've reached with OpenAI, Anthropic, and a lot of these folks with GPT. But I think the issue for me is that beyond that, it's really how we're generating data. And you cannot talk about smart government without data. Mbugua mentioned open data portal. But interesting enough, Mbugua, is that 90% of the data that we have was created 2 years ago. So even if we had an open data portal, we'll still not be anywhere because data has reached exponential. And so you cannot talk about smartness or governance without data governance. Glad that the ministry is doing something about data governance, but the idea it needs to support long-term economic growth and decision making. That's a day in data. You'll get the slides. We're just producing a lot of data. But I think if we look at that into context and everything I've said, if there are a couple of principles that we need to focus on or strategic cycles, one is that we need to work with speed. 90%, 2 years. If you are still doing policies, by the time 3 years, this 90% is going to double again. You will not catch up. The second part is then you need to use that data to drive policies, not the other way around. You need to be very innovative in terms of how you do your digital services because inclusivity is a thing. You need to have a secure public infrastructure, as I mentioned the risks earlier, and then that part of skilling. And I mentioned the piece around how do you ensure that you have the right talent, but also ensuring that you have the right people working for you. Overarching, I think for me, is once you have that, then you need to be very citizen-centered. You need to ensure that you are data-driven and transparent. Everything must be interoperable, even with private sector. So you cannot build a silo of government systems that are not interoperable with private sector because you work with private sector. Safaricom provides M-Pesa, payment gateways, and I can mention many other people. Then you need to be inclusive and it needs to be greener because we need to leave the planet in a way that we can save it. A couple of use cases, and I'm using the Kenya ones. If you're in a city, you can be smart from your healthcare to your office to your waste management to your mirror. I mean, if you're private sector, the businesses are endless. So smartness is not in abstract. Smartness can be a business opportunity. I'm sure you're seeing some action lab there. At least for Kenya, the president announced this. So this is something we are running around co-creation. So part of smartness and engaging is having a place where you can do things together. Government, civil society, private sector, rolling up their sleeves, no protocol, hakuna your excellency hapa, ni kufanya kazi. Because ultimately citizens don't care. Because you have a trust deficit. Citizens would not see you with your titles. They want to see whether when I go to a tap, there's water. There's no your excellency bowing on your tap to take your water. It just needs to work. And so how do we ensure that we co-create and work together so that we can deliver services? So this is a quick one we've done with IBM. I'm sure one of our colleagues will come and talk about this. Very simple, solving a question of afforestation, working together with private sector, and using those tools that we mentioned, whether it's artificial intelligence or maps or data, just to understand the extent to which we can manage our forest resources and go downstream on how we can manage our water resources, go downstream how we can transition people from energy or forests into clean cooking, going downstream to ensure that we can measure health outcomes because of their use of cooking technologies that are not clean. Simple. And this is a collaboration between government of Kenya and Climate Envoy, my office, the presidency, IBM, in a very short period of time. The darker it is, the more forested it is. The lighter it is, the more deforested it is. Very simple. That's how you do smartness. It will have taken us, 15, 20 years, 20 workshops, 3 reports, 10 Naivashas to do this. We did it very quickly. Munajijua. Then, of course, floods. Missing my picture again. When you had floods in April, very quick, what you see here, again, Microsoft, Meta, Google, ourselves, Red Cross, being able to map critical infrastructure, those ones that have been destroyed by floods, less than a week using artificial intelligence. With Microsoft AI for Good, we have a map of all our critical infrastructure and the ones that were flooded. Those are the 2 overlays. Less than 4 days. That's called smartness. At the global stage, wanted to do this in terms of multi-stakeholder collaborative. I was part of this shenanigans called the UN AI Advisory Body. 38 people, less than a year, were able to produce a report and a UN resolution on governing artificial intelligence. It means even in public policy makers, you can have a multi-stakeholder collaborative at global stage. The most complicated stage with geopolitics, we're able to pull this off. by consensus, because that's what smartness does. Using data, using technology, using AI itself to develop a resolution in terms of just understanding its implications and being able to get this by consensus and being able to frame it in this way, I think for me was a big deal. So some examples are there. They're just not tools, but also it's process and ways within which we develop public policy. I've just mentioned this. You're mentioning UNGA. I had to put that page there in terms of the global digital compact, in terms of what we're able to do in terms of just by consensus is to get all these things in place, including a global governance of AI, a framework agreed. And as I end, it's about investment. You have to put money. And the money for me will always be this thing. I'm sure you've seen this slide. I will slog it. I'll put it to death. Invest in data. People don't invest in data. You invest in other things. Invest in technology. Yeah. Nobody invests in data. Not statistics. You need to invest in energy, especially for the 70% who are not included in that slide that I mentioned. A lot of it is electricity issues. You must invest in skills, reskilling, upskilling. You must invest in agile governance. You must invest in it because policymakers, all your policymakers in companies must be skilled enough to understand how technology is moving. I call it technology fluency. You must invest in partnerships and collaborations. Partnerships take time to build. It's like dating. You just don't show up. And all these things are interdependent. You can't just do one. You must invest in all of them as an ecosystem. When it comes to artificial intelligence, of course, it's the three. It's data, it's compute, it's talent. Because you cannot talk smart government in 19th century. You must talk smart government in the 21st century. You cannot do this without artificial intelligence. So please, let's think about how to do this investments. My quick takeaways, again, just to land this point, smartness is about citizen centricity. It's about data-driven decision-making. You must be able to collaborate and everything must be interoperable, even in private sector, within government, break the silos, in government, in your ministries and across ministries. We must be sustainable. And ultimately, we must make a point of being or understanding what technologies are changing, and so that we can be able to adopt them and make them to use in a way that they help advance services. Ultimately, this is the mission. We need to build smartness will be about building safe, secure, inclusive, and trusted digital future. You can have all your tools, but if citizens don't trust it, they will not use it. Mtakuwa nazo tu hapo mnafurahia with your shiny things. Thank you very much, and I think I'm on time.